All right, welcome back. It seems every week we talk about Memphis Tigers athletics. Last week we talked about basketball. Let's bring things back to football because spring football just concluded.
Yeah, spring football is probably one of the more exciting times of the football season, especially if you're a bad team. But luckily, Memphis isn't a bad team.
But Mother Nature put a damper on things, just like y'all's just been doing in the Mid-South.
It's still fun, though, because you get to watch your team, especially in this portal area where you get to watch these unknowns become a part of your team that maybe you didn't really realize before.
Yeah.
So I think I've always been a big lover of spring football.
I do, and like I said, Mother Nature putting a damper on things. As we know in the Mid-South, it's been a lot of raining lately, and so Mother Nature put a damper on the spring football fest that was supposed to happen at the University of Memphis. But our guy who is our inside man, he's a friend of the program. We haven't had him on in a while in a perfect way. Welcome back to the program. He is the head man of the commercial appeal for the Memphis Tigers football, Mr. Jonah Dylan. Welcome back.
Wow, that's quite a introduction. I don't know if I deserve it. Now I got a lot to live up to.
So one thing, Jonah, you'll learn is that Denson is all about the introductions, you know? So to the point that I've decided that when I die, he's going to MC my funeral.
I watch a lot
Just
of
based on
WWE.
introductions.
I watched a lot of wrestling
Wow.
growing up, so, you know.
That's high praise right there. I mean, yeah.
So Jonah, we haven't had a chance to get an eye on the Memphis Tigers football as much as you have. And so kind of just like fill us in on what we've missed, who's QB1, just the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, well, spring practice is always kind of unique. It depends on the place that you're covering, obviously, in terms of the access and stuff. And most of the stuff that we got to see was, stretching or that version, that kind of thing. And like you said, obviously, they're supposed to have a spring fest, which was sort of an open practice that was going to be at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. And it had to get canceled because of the weather. And so they just did a regular practice that day and concluded spring on that day anyways. But it meant that the fans and everyone else didn't get to see kind of the whole practice and the whole team out there. So hopefully they'll be able to obviously reschedule that for some time in the summer. And really, a lot of the spring was getting to know all the new faces, right? Because there's so many new players. The majority of this team, the vast majority of the contributors are going to be transfers. Not necessarily surprising. That's what happens when a coach leaves. Players often leave too. They leave regardless, basically. And so that means there's a lot of new players at almost every position, very few returners, and even fewer returning players who are expected to play significant roles. So for me, it was kind of just, learning new numbers, putting them to faces, and trying to figure out who's going to play a role for this team.
So does that make it, that is a difference in this era of college football, because back in the day, you would have a freshman, that you'd be like, all right, I'm ready to see this guy's growth in this year's spring, practice and spring game. And when you've got all these new players, like you said, right now you're trying to figure out who's who. Yeah. Does that make it more difficult to figure out what this team might look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for us and for the coaches too, right? Because you recruited all these players, and a lot of them, because of the way recruitment goes in the transfer portal, I mean, you've got a couple days to look at film and decide if you want a guy to come, but you don't know what he looks like in person. You don't know how he's going to fit into a system until you actually see him in practice. And so you get out there for spring, and part of it for the coaches is just, let's just see what this guy can do in these types of different environments and these situations that obviously you're trying to put yourself in when you get towards the season. And so I think spring practice is almost like a reset for the team and what do we have? And then as you look towards the summer, you can start to build depth charts and specific roles and things like that.
A couple of weeks ago, I had on Terry Davis, and we talked about Memphis Tigers football, and I asked him what the vibe was, and he said the vibes are vibing. So now I got to ask you, what do you think the vibe is so far under Charles Huff? I know he's brought in guys. He's brought Jimbo in. He's brought Charlie Strong in. There's been reports about a kind of Navy SEALs not listening to music. What is your takeaway of all of that?
I think the vibes are good. I think ultimately, and even Charles Huff said this, people are excited about Charles Huff. They're excited about the energy that he brings. They're excited about what he's doing in recruiting. They're excited about the transfers that he brought in. But ultimately, he's 0-0, right? He hasn't played a game yet. And so it's good to have excitement around the program. It does matter because you're trying to drive fan interest. You're trying to get people excited. You're trying to get national attention. You want to put yourself on the radar. But at the same time, you get to the season and none of that really matters. And so, yes, it's good right now. And I feel like people are really excited about not only this team, but kind of the direction of the program. But then you get to week 0 when they play UNLV, and then all that stuff kind of goes out the window, and it's just about winning football games.
What do you think about the difference? And some of it's going to be hard because you're right now, again, you're just trying to learn everybody's trying to learn everybody's faces and names. Yeah. But as far as like what this team looks like from a schematic, or, are they going to be grounded pound? Are they going to be, air raid, compared to what you've seen in the past with when Coach Silverfield was there? Just kind of what you've seen in the differences.
Yeah, it's going to be different on both sides of the ball. Starting with the offense, Kevin Decker is the new offensive coordinator, and he's going to bring a pretty widespread scheme and a really quick kind of scheme, similar to if you watch Tennessee, a Josh Heupel offense, Alex Golish at USF, and now at Auburn, obviously. So if you think about those Memphis, South Florida games where it felt like they snap the ball, the play ends, and they're snapping the ball again 5 seconds, 10 seconds later, you're going to see that version of offense from Memphis this year. So it is going to be a lot different than what you saw when Tim Cramsey was the offensive coordinator. It means a lot of fast stuff, and it means potentially you score really quickly, but also you have some of those possessions where you get the ball back and maybe you go 3 and out and 20 seconds went off the clock, and you're wondering, your defense is tired. On the other side of the ball, you're going to see a 4-2-5 system from Lance Guidry, different than the Jordan Hankins system from the past couple of years, which was more of a 3-3-5. It means 4 down rushers, and it means hopefully more pressure on the quarterback. And then obviously really important at those linebacker positions and at the nickel corner spot.
Yeah, that 4-2-5, I tell my son all the time, you see 2 linebackers, that's nickel. Get ready every time.
See, that's one thing I can't do. I don't know how to read defensive coverages. Even in playing Madden, I have no clue. I'm all ask coach. Whatever call, I always hit the X button and be like, or the square button, just ask the coach whatever we're going to run defensively. But we talk about defensively. Charles Huff, what do you think? What is you think kind of the expectations of him? Well, obviously on both sides of the ball. I talked about it with Terry. Memphis, for the most part, has been a run-and-gun football team where everything is through the trenches. Do you think that kind of stays the same with Charles Huff, especially with his background that he kind of helped, build up a guy like Saquon Barkley when Saquon Barkley was in college? Or do you think with the quarterback that he brought in, or the quarterbacks that he's brought in, that he probably transitions Memphis to throw the ball a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you go back to what I was saying about the offense, Kevin Decker, that scheme is designed to go really fast and to spread the defense out, really. And so I don't think you're going to see a lot of pounding the ball up the middle. Obviously, if you're near the goal line, you're going to come in with different personnel, but you're going to see a lot of spread stuff. Charles Huff has said pretty consistently, I mean, with receivers, he wants speed and he wants to go down the field quickly. So you're going to see that type of an offense. And it's going to be different, like I said, than what you've seen the past couple of years. Defensively, I do think the trenches are going to be important. Obviously, they're important on any team, but you're looking for a way to create an advantage against the defense, and really on both sides of the ball. And I think that's what they're going to try to do with this new scheme.
I tell you what, if you're going to go that fast, you better have some depth on the defensive line for sure, because those guys are going to get tired. Because you're going to play a lot more defense than you're going to play offense in that type of system for sure, Jonah. And so, what has there been a transfer portal guy who has stood out to you so far? Somebody that's came in that you've said, okay, this guy, he's going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the nickel spot, right? And so that spot is going to be Ian Foster, most likely, who came from Southern Miss. And that spot in this defense and the way this scheme is going to be is really important because you need a really versatile player who can do multiple things. And Ian Foster is a playmaker in the defensive backfield in the best sense of the word. You look at the stuff he did at Southern Miss, 99-yard interception return for a touchdown. He was a dynamic kick returner when he was at Marshall. And someone who can make plays really from anywhere in the defensive backfield. And then that nickel spot is super important because you're going to be moving around the field. You're going to have to play different types of roles. You're going to have to cover for other people. And there's a couple guys, especially from Southern Miss on the defensive side of the ball, who are going to play big roles. But I think he might be the X factor in terms of the defense and how everything comes together.
Now, I know this is still very early in the process, but I like to always ask these questions at different points. As of today, what do you think are the expectations for the Tigers football team? And do you think that this team is capable of winning the American title?
Yeah, expectations are a really good question. It's really tough to say with kind of where the conference is and where other teams are. Are they capable? Absolutely. I think you can sit here right now, and probably it'll be the same when we get closer to the season. You can sit here and convince me that Memphis should be the favorite to win this conference, and I think it's totally valid. You could also sit here and say, I don't think Memphis should be in the top 3 or 4, and you got plenty of reasons to think that as well, because there's so many new things, there's so many unknowns. The thing is, when you look around the conference, you can do that with basically every other team. There's a ton of unknowns with every team that's expected to be at the top of the conference. And so it's really about who do you trust more in terms of these new coaches, these new quarterbacks at a lot of these places, and how everything comes together. It's going to be really interesting when we get closer to the season to see how that kind of formulates in terms of, do most people fall on one side of it? Do you think South Florida is the team that people look at? Is it Tulane? Is it Memphis? You could really make a case for probably 5 or 6 different teams at this point in the offseason.
There's so much. The American Conference may have had the most change in it from top to bottom, from coaches to personnel and staff. So much change in the conference. I think you're 100% right. Jonah, how would you even know who's going to be good right now? Because there's just so much change. I mean, it won't be till the first couple of times when we see everybody play that we say, okay, well, this looks like it's a good fit, or this looks like it didn't work, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of these teams, again, you kind of go down the list of who was really good in the conference the past couple of years. Tulane had a lot of success. They brought in Will Hall as their new coach, and there's a ton of questions about that because Will Hall is the one who went 1-11 and got fired at Southern Miss, and that led to Charles Huff getting the job there, right? So, and this is his first head coaching job since then. South Florida is a really interesting one. Obviously, we know about the investment they've had, not really just in their football program, but in their athletics department as a whole. Brian Hartline is someone who has a huge pedigree as an assistant. Obviously, you look at all the first-round wide receivers at Ohio State, but he's never been a head coach before. And so you got to temper your expectations in that context. You look at the other programs, North Texas, new coach, ECU, same coach, but they lost both their coordinators and they lost basically all their top players. Same, Navy lost a senior class that was so dominant for them for a couple of years. They're going to have to rebuild with a lot of new players, and obviously they can't use the transfer portal to do that. So you look at all these teams and you can kind of poke holes in everyone. And that includes Memphis, by the way. It's not that Memphis is ahead of them. But at the same time, you've got to pick one of them, right? If you're going to make a pick to win the conference. And I think a lot of people are going to look at it and say Memphis has the least questions.
Well, the question that everybody's always wanted to know, and it's the most important one, who's the quarterback?
Yeah, who's QB1?
So as of right now, I mean, I don't think Huff is officially named his QB1, but who do you think has the inside track and what should we know about him?
Yeah, so obviously you have this competition, which is really between Marcus Stokes and Aaron Nolan. Marcus Stokes coming from West Florida, Aaron Nolan coming from South Carolina. Both former high-ranked recruits, different paths. Marcus Stokes went to the Division II level. Obviously, after his offers went away, he was going to go to Florida originally. Goes to Division II, plays a lot and plays really well for his last year. And then Aaron Nolan goes to Ohio State, doesn't play, goes to South Carolina, doesn't play, and ultimately decides to come to Memphis. And so both talented quarterbacks, both with the pedigree in terms of what they did in high school and what people thought of them coming out. I think Marcus Stokes, because of the experience, that always gives him an edge. We talk about it with quarterbacks all the time. If you have experience, you're always going to have an edge. That's one of the reasons why Brandon Lewis walked in here last year and had an edge right away in the quarterback competition. He had so much experience. I know it's kind of a trick because at the same time, everyone says you need experience, but obviously everybody has to start for the first time somewhere, right?
Yep.
So you got to get the experience. But when you go into a competition and one person has the experience, even if it's at the Division II level, versus somebody else who doesn't have any real game experience, especially not starter experience, that's going to give Marcus Stokes the advantage. Like you said, the quarterback competition is not done. It's going to go into the summer, and both guys are going to have opportunities to win it. But I think that's where it stands right now.
You just brought up a very interesting and valid point, Jonah, because I've said this a couple of times in a couple of different situations. These guys who move, like an Aaron Nolan, but he's not the only one. It happens every year. These guys who move from spot to spot to spot, hoping to finally get their chance. At some point, you wonder if they shouldn't just drop down a level, get the experience, because that guy's 2 years removed from playing significant football, right? And so whether it's more natural talent or not, you're 1,000% correct. That experience matters tremendously. Seeing defenses in real time in game situations, whether it's at the Division I or Division II level, is still an experience that makes a difference. And I hate to see when a guy, like if Nolan doesn't get the job, right, and Stokes does get the job, then that's a third year of him watching football, potentially developing, but not really on the field. So that'll be a tough situation for sure.
Sometimes that's the way how the cookie crumbles, though.
It's tough. I mean, and Jody, you've been able to be around them more and see some of this in real time. So, as you say, that competition is neck and neck, and it's going to go through. Stokes, obviously, they were both highly recruited out of high school, and Stokes does have that experience. What's your take on maybe what Nolan would have to do to be able to get on the field ahead of Stokes? Because Stokes does have the experience nudge ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes out of consistency in practice. Obviously, that's what they do. One of the things that Charles Huff said at the end of spring practice that I thought was interesting was when he goes into the summer, he's going to evaluate all the stuff they do before they even start practice. He's going to evaluate who has people over at their apartments for barbecues, who's watching extra film with their teammates and stuff like that. I don't know if their cooking is part of it. That could be a huge competition to see who gets to be the quarterback. But those types of things in terms of team camaraderie, right? Because when we go back to what we were talking about before, a team of all new transfers, that means there's no chemistry between guys, right? And so the quarterback is the most important position on the field. It's the most important leadership position. That means you got to bring all these guys together. And so these next couple months, they're not going to be practicing, but this is their chance to kind of grow as a team and build that chemistry. And it all starts with the quarterback. And so part of the evaluation is, how do they do in that context? How do they do with their teammates being leaders, and how they do that? And it's interesting because just kind of getting to talk to both guys, they both are very different personality wise and have different leadership styles. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops also over the next couple months.
A lot of questions regarding the Memphis Tigers football, but our guy, Jonah Dylan, has a lot of the answers. He does a great job. He's just the workhorse over there at the Commercial Appeal. Jonah, we appreciate having you back on the program. Thank you for joining us again, my friend.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, big dog.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go from Memphis to Ole Miss. We'll be right back on the 24th floor.